Welcome to our deep dive all about becoming a wholesale merchant in meat and meat products. We're going to be using RoleCatcher's resources to really help you nail that interview. We're going to go deeper than just surface level answers.
Yeah.
We're going to help you understand what hiring managers in this industry are actually looking for.
It is a really fascinating field when you think about it. Every cut of meat that you see on supermarket shelves, every juicy steak that you see on a restaurant menu, it all goes through a wholesale merchant at some point in the process.
But I never thought about it like that.
Eh,
It's such a crucial part of the industry. And it's so much more than just knowing different types of meat.
Hmm.
You have to understand the entire supply chain, the market trends, all the regulations involved. It's really a dynamic world. RoleCatcher's career guide really stresses that. They talk about the fast-paced, high-pressure environment.
Oh, absolutely. It's not your average 9 to 5 desk job. You need to be able to handle tight deadlines. Prices are always changing, maybe even a late night call with a supplier on the other side of the world.
So anyone going into this field, you really need to prove you can thrive in that kind of setting. Not just say it, but show it. And the way you answer those interview questions, that's a big part of it. Speaking of which, let's jump right in with some sample interview questions from RoleCatcher. Okay, so first up, what inspired you to pursue a career in the meat industry?
Now, this one might seem simple enough, but it's your chance to show off that you have genuine passion for this. And I don't mean just saying, oh, I really love to eat steak. It's about digging a little deeper and figuring out what is it about this specific industry that really intrigues you.
That's where RoleCatcher's AI can be super helpful. It analyzes the job description and tells you which skills to focus on. So, for example, if a job posting mentions market analysis or negotiation, you can actually weave that into your inspiration story. You're showing them you're already thinking like a wholesale merchant from the get-go.
Exactly. So imagine you see that the job description really emphasizes sustainability. Well, you could talk about being inspired by connecting consumers with ethically sourced meat. Shows you get their values right from day one.
I like that. It's all about showing them you understand their values. Okay, let's move on to question number 2. How do you keep up to date with changes in the meat industry? Now, I might be tempted to just rattle off a list of trade publications, but I feel like there has to be more to it than that.
It's a good starting point, but they want to see how you take action, how you apply what you learn. So, for example, did you read about a new food safety technology and then you suggested implementing it at your previous job? Or maybe a conference you attended sparked an idea for a new market trend you wanted to explore.
So it's about taking action, connecting it to real-world experience. So I could talk about how I was reading about the growing popularity of plant-based alternatives, and that got me thinking. And it motivated me to learn more about alternative protein sourcing and how that affects the traditional meat market.
That's the kind of answer they're looking for. You're not just reading headlines, you're thinking critically about how these trends are going to impact your role in the future. Now, what if they follow that up with, what's the biggest challenge facing the meat industry today?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, maybe I'd talk about balancing sustainability with affordability.
Mm.
There's a lot of pressure to do both, and that really impacts every decision a wholesale merchant makes when they're sourcing products.
That's a really insightful point. Shows you're not just thinking about your little corner of the industry, you're thinking with a bigger picture. And you're connecting those big challenges to the actual day-to-day work of a wholesale merchant.
Okay, I'm liking this. I feel like I can handle these curveballs. All right, let's move on to question number 3.
Mm.
How do you ensure that your products meet customer needs and preferences?
This one's all about showing that you are customer-centric, that you really get it. They want to see that you're not just focused on moving products, but on understanding who your buyers are and what they actually need.
So it's not enough to just say, I provide high-quality meat. I need to show I understand the different types of customers out there, right?
Yeah.
Like a fancy restaurant versus a school cafeteria. They're going to have very different priorities.
Exactly. Imagine they say, tell me about a time you had to adapt a product to meet a very specific customer need. You could talk about how you found a supplier of grass-fed beef for a client that was really passionate about sustainability. You're showing you can match the right product to the right values.
That's a great example. And again, RoleCatcher's AI comes in handy here because it analyzes the job description for keywords. So, for instance, if they're stressing organic meat knowledge, I know that's something I need to emphasize in my answer. I need to talk about my experience with organic certifications and all of that.
Right. It's like having a personalized cheat sheet for every interview. Okay, let's move on to question 4. How do you identify and manage risk in the meat industry? This one sounds a little intimidating if you ask me.
Yeah, when you're dealing with perishable goods and such a complex supply chain, The stakes are pretty high. What kind of risks should I even be thinking about?
Well, think about things like disease outbreaks, weather events. The price of everything is always fluctuating. And then there's the ever-changing consumer preferences you have to stay on top of. They want to know that you can see these problems coming and that you're taking steps to prevent them.
So they're not looking for someone who panics at the first sign of trouble.
Definitely not. This is about showing them that you can think on your feet and that you're a decisive person.
Could I use an example like, let's say, a blizzard shut down all the transportation routes, and I had to scramble to find a new supplier ASAP? That shows I'm resourceful, and I'm not going to let a little snowstorm disrupt the whole supply chain.
That's a perfect example. You took a potentially bad situation and you turned it into a showcase for your problem-solving skills. What if they then say, okay, but what's your process for staying informed about all these potential risks?
Well, I tell them about how I keep up with all the industry news, I subscribe to important alerts, and of course, I make sure to build really strong relationships with suppliers so they can give me a heads up if they think there might be a problem brewing.
Excellent. You've shown that you're proactive and that you take a multifaceted approach to risk management. That's the kind of answer that's going to make you stand out. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're going to get into some more of these really important interview questions, so get ready to take some notes.
I am ready. I already feel so much more prepared to talk about my experience and my knowledge, thanks to everything we've covered so far. Let's jump into question number 5. How do you manage relationships with suppliers and vendors? I feel like there's got to be more to it than just being a friendly person.
Oh, definitely. It's really about building these strategic partnerships. Remember, the success of a wholesale merchant depends entirely on having that strong network of suppliers. It's all about balance, meeting the needs of your company, but also respecting the needs of the suppliers and making sure the whole system runs smoothly.
It sounds like a delicate dance. How can I really showcase my ability to handle those relationships in an interview?
Think of yourself as a bridge. You're connecting the people who raise the meat or produce the meat to the people who are selling it to customers. You negotiate prices, you have to make sure quality standards are met, and sometimes you got to navigate some tricky situations like if there's a shortage of something.
So if they ask me, tell me about a time you had to resolve a conflict with a supplier, I could talk about when a shipment came in and the quality wasn't up to par, and how I had to work with a supplier to find a solution that worked for both of us.
Exactly. You're showing them you can have those tough conversations, but still keep the relationship going strong. And don't forget, the meat industry, it's a global business. You might be working with people all over the world, so understanding different cultures and communication styles, that's a big plus.
That's a really good point. It's not just business, it's about building trust across borders.
Yeah.
Okay, so question number 6. How do you ensure that your products are compliant with regulatory requirements? I know this is a big one.
It's a big deal. You got to show them you take compliance seriously because you're dealing with a product that affects public health directly. So don't just say, I follow the rules. Give them concrete examples of how you've actually ensured compliance in your past work.
So let's say I worked in a food processing facility. I could talk about how I know all about HACCP plans and how I was involved in implementing those procedures to make sure everything was safe and compliant.
Now that's a solid start. And what if they follow up with something like, what's the most challenging regulation you've had to deal with, and how did you handle it?
Let me think. Well, importing meat from certain countries can get really complicated. I could talk about how I had to research and make sure all the documentation and the certifications were in order to meet the regulations of both the exporting country and the importing country.
There you go. You've shown that you pay attention to detail and that you're willing to go the extra mile to make sure everything is done by the book.
This is making me realize just how much knowledge is involved in this role. It's so much more than just buying and selling. It's understanding the whole web of factors that are all interconnected.
Absolutely. And this is where RoleCatcher's AI can really help you connect those dots. So let's say you see the job description emphasizes knowledge of USDA regulations. The AI will pick up on that and remind you to brush up on those specific regulations before you walk into that interview.
It's like having a personalized study guide.
Yeah,
Love that. All right, let's move on to question number 7. How do you manage product quality across your supply chain? This has got to be so important in the meat industry.
Oh, without a doubt. You need to have freshness, safety, proper handling, no room for error there. They want to see you understand how to make sure quality is maintained from the very beginning at the farm or the processing plant all the way to the customer's plate.
That's a long journey for a piece of meat to take. How can I showcase my knowledge of that entire process?
Think about all the steps involved. You could talk about your experience with things like supplier audits, doing regular inspections, making sure the temperature is monitored during transportation, and of course, clearly communicating those quality standards to everybody involved along the way.
So if they say, describe your quality control process, I could walk them through each step and give specific examples from my own experience. Like maybe I could talk about a time I implemented a new system to track the temperature data during shipments and how that led to a huge reduction in spoilage.
Perfect. You're showcasing your proactive approach and your ability to use data to make decisions. Here's another tip. The meat industry has all sorts of certifications for quality and safety like BRC or SQF. If you have experience with those, mention them. It shows you're on top of the industry best practices.
I will definitely make a note of that.
Okay.
Question number 8. How do you manage pricing and profitability in a competitive market? This feels like a real test.
This one is all about showing your business smarts. You need to understand how the market works, how to analyze costs, and how to make strategic decisions about pricing. And remember, the meat market can be unpredictable. Prices go up and down depending on supply and demand, what time of year it is, and even what's happening in the world.
So they're not just looking for a number cruncher. They want someone who can anticipate changes and make smart choices under pressure.
Exactly. You need to know what affects the price. Production costs, transportation, storage, what your competitors are charging, and of course what customers are willing to pay. You got to show you can analyze all of those things and come up with a pricing strategy that's profitable but also keeps you competitive.
If they ask me about my experience with pricing, I could talk about the time when the cost of feed went way up and I had to adjust our pricing for a certain cut of meat. I had to figure out how it would affect our profits, look at what our competitors were doing, and finally recommend a price change that took all those factors into account.
That's a great example. You showed that you think strategically about pricing and that you can make informed decisions to protect the bottom line. Now, what if they ask, how do you stay on top of market trends that might affect pricing?
Well, I would definitely mention staying up to date with industry publications, going to trade shows, networking with other people in the business. But I could also talk about the systems I use, like I monitor commodity prices, I follow livestock reports, I even look at consumer purchasing data to try to anticipate those shifts in demand.
That's a really strong response. You're showing that you are proactive and that you use multiple methods to stay ahead of the curve.
I'm actually feeling more and more confident as we go through these questions. This deep dive is really helping me connect my experience to what hiring managers are actually looking for.
That's what we like to hear. And remember, confidence is key in an interview. One way to build that confidence is to practice your answers out loud.
That's where RoleCatcher's video practice feature can be so helpful. I can record myself answering these questions and get feedback from the AI on my delivery and how clear I'm being.
Exactly. It's like having a personal interview coach right there on your phone. Okay, we've made great progress today, but we have one more really important question to cover, and it's a big one. How do you lead and develop a high-performing team?
Ooh, this one feels a little intimidating, to be honest. I haven't had a ton of direct management experience yet.
You know, that's okay. Even if you haven't officially managed a team, you've probably had experiences where you took on a leadership role. Think about group projects, volunteering at an organization. Maybe you even mentored a colleague at some point.
So I could talk about the time I led a fundraising project for a local charity. I had to organize all the volunteers, figure out who was doing what, and keep everyone motivated to reach our goal.
Now, that is a fantastic example. You're showing them you can take initiative, that you can delegate effectively, and that you can get people excited about working towards a common goal. What if they then say, what is your leadership style?
That's a tough one to answer. I would say I'm a pretty collaborative leader. I like to keep the communication open, and I think it's important to give people the power to share their ideas. I believe in setting clear expectations, being supportive, and recognizing people's achievements to create a positive and productive environment.
That's a great way to put it. You've explained your philosophy in a clear and concise way. And remember, even without tons of official management experience, you can still demonstrate your leadership potential.
This is really making me think about all the qualities that make a great leader in the meat industry. It's not just about telling people what to do, it's about building trust, motivating people, and creating a shared vision for success.
And we are back for the final part of our deep dive on how to totally ace that interview for a wholesale merchant in meat and meat products. We've gone through a bunch of those tough questions, but now it's about putting it all together. What's the game plan?
We've got the foundation down. Now it's time to really fine-tune things. It's like when you're seasoning a perfectly aged steak, you know? The right touch can make all the difference.
I like that. So we have all the main ingredients for our answers. What are those extra spices that are going to make me unforgettable?
Well, remember when we talked about how the meat industry is expected to keep growing? That means there's going to be a lot of competition. You can't just be qualified. You need to show them you're the perfect fit for this particular company.
Okay, so I can't just talk about the industry generally. I need to do my research on this specific company. Exactly. Let's say you're interviewing with a company that's known for sourcing locally. Well, weave that into your answers. Talk about your experience with building relationships with farmers in the region, or how you understand the advantages of a shorter supply chain.
That's a great way to show them I'm not just pulling out prepackaged answers. I'm actually thinking about how I fit into their company culture.
Exactly. And remember those career stages from the RoleCatcher guide. Those can help you tailor your answers too. Think about how you'd answer differently if you were going for an entry-level role versus a senior management position.
Makes sense. So if I'm just starting out, I might talk more about my eagerness to learn the ropes about their specific sourcing methods. But if I'm going for a leadership role, I'd want to highlight my track record of successfully managing those tricky supply chains and negotiating great deals with suppliers.
You got it. It's about knowing your audience and your goals. And don't forget RoleCatcher's AI. It can help a lot at this stage too.
Right, the AI. How does that come into play for this final prep?
Well, it analyzes that job description, and it picks out those keywords and phrases that give you clues about what the company really cares about. So if you see them using supply chain optimization a lot, that's something to focus on in your answers. Shows you're in tune with their main concerns.
It's like having a secret decoder ring for the job description. Okay, but beyond keywords, what are some other things I can do to really impress them?
Remember how we talked about the pros and cons of the job? The guide mentions that the work can be pretty demanding, long hours, lots of pressure. Well, use that to your advantage.
Wait, how do I spin a potential negative into something positive?
Show them that you not only understand those challenges, but you actually thrive on them. Talk about your ability to stay calm when things get crazy, how good you are at juggling lots of tasks at once. Maybe even share a story about a time you went above and beyond to meet a deadline.
I see. So instead of just saying I work hard, I'm giving them specific examples that actually relate to their needs.
You got it. And enthusiasm. That goes a long way. You got to show them you have a real passion for the product, the process, the whole industry. Let that passion shine through in your answers.
I'm always enthusiastic. But seriously, how do I convey that without going overboard?
Just be genuine. Be specific. Maybe talk about a particular cut of meat that you find really interesting, or a new trend in sustainable farming that you're excited about. You could even tell a little story about a time you were really thrilled about a successful deal or a happy customer.
Well, I could talk about when I visited a local farm that specialized in heritage-freed pork. I was so impressed with how much they cared about animal welfare and sustainable practices. It was a real learning experience for me, and it made me appreciate everything that goes into producing high-quality meat.
Oh, that's perfect. It shows you're genuinely interested. You pay attention to details and you connect with the product on a deeper level than just buying and selling. People hire people, they like people they feel a connection with.
That's so true. Feeling way more prepared for this interview now. Any last words of wisdom before we wrap things up?
Just remember you have a ton of great resources to help you. RoleCatcher's AI, those insights we've talked about in this deep dive, they're all here for you. Practice your answers, research the company, and most importantly, believe in yourself and your passion for this field.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to all our listeners out there, go out there and knock them dead, show them what you've got, and land that dream job. And remember, the world of meat awaits.